We're going to let everybody introduce themselves again real quickly to tell you who they are, and then we're going to get right into it, because this is the meaty session talking about how do you make money and how do you market. Let's go ahead and start right here.
Eduardo Montes Bradley, independent and self-indulgent filmmaker and writer.
I'm Andy Edmonds, Director of Virginia Film Office.
I'm Jesse Vaughn, filmmaker, director.
Sarah Elizabeth Timmons, producer, and I have a company, Life Out Loud Films.
Ken Roy, producer, documentary film editor, all-around film enthusiast.
David Powers, I work for Ken Roy. Director, writer.
All right, let's jump right in. And Heather is on the panel too, but she's coming in a minute. First question here, financing. So what new models of financing? I mean, everybody knows the old ones, you get somebody rich, a multimillionaire to pay for your film. Well, that doesn't happen. So what new models are you aware of that are gaining traction, and what are the pros and cons of these models?
You just started right in there, didn't you?
Go for the meat. Sigh. They're all sighing.
Come on, Sarah, you're the one with the hat and the rabbits, pulling the rabbits out here, or David?
So what are the financial models? How are we getting films made now?
Indiegogo,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm not as familiar with the Indiegogo crowdfunding. What I do know of it is that, well, I'm not going to speak on it. The way we have raised the money for all of our films are strictly private equity. Some grants, but no loans, no gap financing, nothing like that. I personally, there we go again, firmly believe that you have to have all the money in the bank that's going to not just get the film made, but get it edited through post, and you have some dollars to be able to market it and get it out and distributed. So that's really the model that I work on, and so I'm not as familiar with the other ones.
Anybody else have any other approaches?
Well, we're really out of the box. We're a nonprofit 501c3 production company. I don't know of any others like that. I'm sure there are some somewhere. And so we've just been beating the bushes, raising money from not investors, but donors.
For years.
For 6 years. And we're still raising money. And I agree with you, Sarah Elizabeth, to have all the money in the bank before you start to do all the way through marketing. I just don't practice what I preach.
Uh-huh.
But that's a different, and the long-term, the model for this is raise the money from people who believe in what you're doing, and then do a project, and you begin to see some income, hopefully, from that project. You get 2 or 3 in distribution, and then it becomes a self-sustaining basis. It'll never pay for everything, but it forms a basis. So I don't know how applicable that is for any of you, but that's we're either geniuses or we're delusional. We'll find out in a few years.
Any other comments before we, Jesse?
I've done 2 pictures, motion pictures as a director, and one was a studio picture that was at Warner Brothers, and one was an independent. The film industry has changed. Like, it's so different now. I was talking to the president of Morgan Creek, David Robinson, about 5 months ago maybe. It used to be that you could go to a studio and have a great piece of material, and they go, wow, this script's amazing. We're going to send it to whoever, Julia Roberts, whoever their stars are, the bankable stars. They always want bankable stars. Now it's you call a studio and they say, okay, wow, great script. Who's in it? What do you mean who's in it? They want you to package before they decide to finance. They don't want to do the work anymore. It's really interesting to me. And that's a catch-22, because you sit down with a major actor, which I've done before, and I don't want to name drop, but 2 like Academy Award winning actors, and you're not going to get them to sign off on a project unless you have the money. I'll name drop one. Okay, I'll name drop. Okay, so I had dinner with Morgan Freeman once, right? So Morgan, we've got this project. I had dinner with Morgan Freeman, I had a meeting with Denzel Washington, both same thing. Here's the deal. Look, we love your script. Great. We say to both of them, the first was Denzel, hey, Sony will finance this film if you just attach yourself to it. I'm not attaching myself to it unless you have the money. What do you mean? Well, but you've got to show me that you have the money in the bank. But we're saying they will finance if you say yes. The agents will not allow them to sign off on anything. And the reason, it was Kim Basinger? Yeah, Kim Basinger did that and eventually got sued for $8 million because she signed off on a project, the project failed, and the producer sued her because she signed a letter of intent. So nobody does that anymore, and that's what makes it complicated. Okay, so that's the reality of studio. Then you cut to independent. And I don't want to discourage you, because I don't look at filmmaking as being difficult, because I don't use that word. I look at it as being challenging. So when you go to the independent world, you say, well, how am I going to raise this money? Well, of course you can go through social media, Indiegogo, places like that, but how much money are you going to get? $50,000, $500,000. You can do that, but then there's the distribution end of that. The first thing a distributor is going to ask you, when you see someone says, hey, let's go to the movies, what do you say? That's one. What's the second one? Who's in it? So a distributor is going to say, okay, I'm interested in your film. Who's in it? The reason they say who's in it is because that has to be a bankable person that has a fan base. Say they have a fan base of 10 million fans or more. It's really mathematics. They calculate the return on their investment in terms of the bankability of the particular actor. So again, it gets really complicated. But now there's the other side. For most of you in here, I would say if it's a project of passion and you're just getting going, don't worry about any of that stuff. You try to figure out, maybe through social media is probably your best bet to try to raise funds, or through your friends. Me personally, I don't ask my friends.
Eduardo?
Because they kill
I'm
me.
sorry.
I think it's getting increasingly difficult through social media. And the whole thing about the attachment of names to the studio system. It's true, but I was a part of a film that was done many years ago called El Mariachi. And there was no names attached to it. Nobody knew who did it. The film was bad. But it was just a marketing strategy that worked out pretty good, and it was a success. It turned out to be a success. But what I was trying to say, what I want to say really is that all roads lead to Rome. And if you want to make the film, whatever you take, approach to it, except kidnapping and asking for a ransom or robbing a bank, as long as it's legitimate, it's okay. I give you 3 examples only of my own. I have a film on the festival this year called Monroe Hill, about the first farm on Albemarle County of James Monroe. That was made mostly with an award from the Jefferson Trust. So that's easy. It's easy when you get it. When you get the award, no. But if you get the award, you have the money, go shoot the film, and that's the end of it. Another film that we did was the biography on Julian Bond, which we're very happy for it, and which I am presenting now in the Royal Academy in London on May 28th. And that film was done with no money, so I had no money to do that film. So basically what I did is I sacrificed the profit of some commercial films that I was doing for UCLA at the time, and that they were paying me for to do some biographies, and I just took the cash, made Julian Bond, and run. And then there was another film. We won an award here last year with a film called White, on the life of John Borden Evans, a painter here in Virginia. And when I have to make a film about painters, I go like, well, if I really get engaged and I really like it, and go like, fantastic. Now take that painting off the wall and give it to me. Then I go sell the painting, make the movie. So if you really want to make the movie, there's many ways, especially in documentary filmmaking. This is not the same thing with narrative and with fiction, obviously. But if you stick behind your project, and like they said before earlier today, you dream about it. I think you take it to bed, you sleep with it, and it becomes yours. And it's just a matter of convincing enough people that the film has to be made.
Great,
but there is
great.
no one model for producing,
Right,
no one
right.
new model. There is each film, it's its own baby. You know?
Right. We can move on to the next question. Someone who hadn't had a chance to speak yet. State incentives. How important are they to the independent producer, not the big budget films that are coming to town? And how competitive are they in the state of Virginia? Anybody on the panel know anything about this?
First, I just wanted to say that it is an exciting time to be a storyteller in this medium. The barrier to entry has been reduced drastically, as we all know. Like this iPhone, beautiful 6 Plus iPhone. You can shoot content now on this with a lens collection that is consumable and palatable by the viewer in a very serious way. I mean, Tangerine, shot on an iPhone, right? Academy Award nominated film. So what that means is, screw the studio. You're the studio, right? You are the broadcaster. If you can figure out how to be innovative, if you have a good story, right? In the 30s, they were selling television licenses for $30,000 a piece, right? Now we're in a world where actually all the licenses are free. The licenses are free. You can tap into the pipeline. You can get your story to the consumer. Now, you have to figure out how to monetize that. There are kids in little boxes out in Santa Monica now that are making $200,000 a year creating content for YouTube, okay? That's not a glorious Terrence Malick experience, maybe, but somewhere in there, good stories are being told, and there's an opportunity between the cat playing piano and the beautifully told story where there's a pipeline. So the opportunity is now there as a storyteller like it's never been, which is very exciting for young people. When I go talk to college classes now, I mean, their eyes are just like, wow, you know, and it's really exciting for us too. So, but the financing model, so that requires a tiny financing model. That's like uncles and dentists and doctors, and for the price of a beach home, you can make a really nice feature film, right? You couldn't do that a few years ago, right? So, but in terms of the corporate financing model that we deal with at the film office for, whether it's from an AMC or a DreamWorks, we deal with that level on down to an independent filmmaker that's doing a $20,000 project. Now, are incentives a key part of that? In fact, they are part of the financing model. People don't even ring the phone unless you have an incentive program. We have one, which is nominal. We're very efficient in how we use it. We try to target projects that have specific ancillary value for tourism. Somehow we can connect it so we can make our incentive program sustainable, so we can tell legislators that, look, we're creating these jobs, we're also creating tourism, commercial, promotional opportunities, so to help us create a sustainable program. So ours is relatively small, but we're pretty efficient in how we use it. We really want to target now, our target is really series television for the ongoing work that it creates, an independent film under $5 million, really, you know, the indie film, because we feel that indie films will allow the crew members to work at a higher level of the food chain, as opposed to Hunger Games 5 coming in and they want a $20 million check. They bring all their keys, and our crew will work in a third position. So the indie films allow people to work up at a higher level and to get more marketable skills that will build an industry that's sustainable. So that's kind of our thing. But yes, incentives are vital today. Will they last forever? The pendulum right now is over there on incentives, right? But it's going to swing back eventually when states and the politics change and people are going to go, no, 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 and it's just going to blow up in some state, or some state, Louisiana, is going to default on a credit or something, and then it's all hell's going to break loose. So it may swing back. So when it does swing back, let's hope we are set up with more real in-the-ground infrastructure here in Virginia to prepare for that. Did I answer the question? I don't know.
Yes, you did. That was great. Speaking of the next step, you were talking about distribution a little bit. That's probably the biggest challenge, unless you just throw it on YouTube, obviously. And the internet has made that more possible, obviously. Can you talk about any experiences that any of you have had, whether it was through a company or distribution? I think somebody on this panel announced a distribution just Thursday night. Talk about just the brief version of how that process went, and then if the rest of you want to talk about how you go about trying to get your stuff out there.
One of the things that we did with Shooting the Prodigal that was very smart on David's part, he brought in Heather as one of the producers on the project, and what she did was what is a term now called PMD, basically focusing on a producer for marketing and distribution. That whether you have a person doing that, you know, if you got a small crew, if you got a small crew and you have to do it yourself, it's either a person or a concept or a task that needs to be done. You need to have somebody on your crew that's focusing on all of the stuff that's going on while you're trying to produce the movie, while you're trying to pre-produce the movie, coordinating with your set photographer, coordinating with your behind-the-scenes person. Because when you start talking with distributors, they want to know what sort of still shots do you have from your shoot. What sort of behind-the-scenes video do you have, documentary do you have ready to go so that they can co-market that along with the trailer or trailers targeted to different audiences. So it's not a walk in the park getting distribution for a small independent film. We were lucky, ours was faith-based, Shooting the Prodigal. So we went to LA for the AFI in November, and right about then was right when War Room had hit. So there was a big awareness in the entertainment industry about War Room and how that was taking over the number one spot in the theaters in the country for a faith-based film. So that gave us an entree to meet with some faith-based distributors, some family distributors, and when we got the offers back from them, nobody wants to give you a lot of money up front. They'll take your X $1,000, X $100,000 film and say, here's $15,000, and we'll market it and hope you have a good day. So that's one of the biggest challenges. Heather, I know that Heather wants to chime in on, because like I said, Heather was really focused for the team on the marketing and distribution side. So she did a lot of discussing with the various distributors that we were negotiating with.
Ken's the best producing partner ever, as in ever. Thank you, Ken. No, I think one of the things we did do right was we kind of assembled our team in terms of what Ken just said, and that is assigning each of us a very specific, niche, 1, 2, 3 things to do. And we tried to stay in our lanes. Now there was some, overflow on the creative side and all that we all chipped in, the casting. But that really was helpful because it was a doozy. AFM, I think, was a great learning experience. One of the things that I tried to do with AFM is set up as many appointments ahead of time as possible. Something we all learned, is that there is a very important window, when you want to start reaching out to distributors. If you go too early, you lose their interest. If you go too late, you get lost in the shuffle. So that is like a 2-week period before any major market. 3 max is when you want to have everything in line, who you're going after, all your contacts, all of your emails. I also used, and hit them, then right at that mark. I also used something that I had never used before in business because it was kind of a fluke situation. A friend of my parents at a dinner event told me how great LinkedIn was. And I was like, really? I'm not a big social media person, and I've learned also from the marketing side that I have to, do that more. But LinkedIn was incredibly valuable for our distribution pursuits. And research on the front end, finding out, like David and Ken will tell you, because it was a faith-based film, that made our job easier. We knew who to target. We knew, like Ken said, the films that had done well and who was involved in those films. So I went after every single one of them, no matter what they were doing, on the marketing side. If they were a distributor, had one little piece of the pie on those films, we went after all of them. And I use LinkedIn, email to be a business, more formal, but LinkedIn to be like, hey, so good to connect with you, kind of to bring a personal touch. And what I really learned is distribution is just as much about building relationships as any other part of our business, our industry, what we do. And it was a great, big learning experience. The last thing that I'll say is, we were so fortunate to have, 6 offers? Yeah?
Soft and...
Yeah. And I won't go into too much detail, but all of those offers included deal points that were all over the board. So much so that, just when we thought we had our right direction, we would come back and do our meetings together, and we were like, yeah, we're going to go with this company, some really big companies. Well, then another company would come back with a different, a deal or something. We'd maybe do our research ahead of time and find out that this particular distributor, even though they look great on paper, they don't treat their filmmakers that great. So then we'd come back full circle and dip back in. That was an incredible learning experience. It made our heads hurt. Coming back and having to make the decision. And it is, as filmmakers, an incredibly risky thing to do. I think we need, and Andy, you may be able to touch on this, we need a couple of strong distribution companies here in Virginia to help, keep this education going so that we have, make it a little easier on our guys here. I'll leave it at that. I'm turning it over.
Yeah, just open up a couple of distributions. No big deal. Anybody else in this group want to say
Here
something?
in Virginia, we have the biggest academic distribution company for documentary content, for academic content, called Alexander Street Press in Alexandria, and they're very good and they pay very well.
Did y'all hear that without the mic?
I mean, I get a royalty check every year, and it's wonderful.
I didn't hear it down here. Say it again.
Alexander.
Alexander Street Press out of Alexandria is one of the largest academic distribution content company in the country, one in the world probably. And they're here, they're in Alexandria. They have about 36 of my films, and I consistently get a very juicy check every year, and I'm very happy, and they're wonderful, and they're here, they're not in California. In fact, there's none in California that I know.
Great.
Yeah,
Sir?
I think one of the I think one of the crying needs that we have, excuse me, in Virginia, and it's not just Virginia, but the whole going to AFM, and I guess at least four of us sitting up here were at AFM. You pay an arm and a leg to go out there and schmooze for 10 days, and I feel like I'm going with my hat in my hand and begging for some attention. And we've invested all this money and this energy and passion into a film, and the folks who are listening to pitches or are buying there are kind of yawning, and they ask Jesse, who's in it?
That's the first
We've heard that so many times. I think that the paradigm has, everything is different now in terms of distribution. And as Andy said, the barrier is not there anymore with the big studios guarding the gate. And I think one of the biggest needs we have is for there to be a way for independent filmmakers like you and us that don't do the $10 million movies, that do the million and under-ish movies, to find a way to our audience. And social media plays a part in that. You got to find your audience, but the gatekeepers are not there anymore. What's missing is the expertise and the passion to help put it together, consortium-like thing. And I'm coming away from this whole process with a new passion for putting together that part of the business here in Virginia that just has not existed. I don't want to have to go to California or New York anymore with my hat in my hand to say, will you please take a look at my movie that I've spent all this money on, and would you please consider giving me a few pennies back on every dollar you make on it? It's infuriating, and it's not necessary, because there doesn't have to be those gatekeepers anymore. Sermon over.
There's a lot of things. When you go to places like the American film market, you have to understand that the people there are trying to sell, not to buy. Yeah. They're there to get the buyers from Spain, from Germany, from Australia, from Japan, to get their monies to satisfy the producers that they interview during the year. So when you are selling at American film market or MIFID or MIP TV or Ken or whatever, and you get a producer that wants to sell a film, it's actually a nuance. It becomes a problem. So they probably throw somebody that is yawning, like you say. But I strongly don't think that the place to go and try to get your film distributed is at the American film market during the American film market. Maybe American film marketed companies through the American film market directory before the markets. During the markets, they're very busy trying to get their money back or trying to get money. That's my idea.
Y'all do quick comments each, and then we're going to have a couple questions for us. Time to wrap up.
I was going to say there is one other way. If you're fortunate enough to get a decent enough budget and can do a union film like with SAG, maybe DGA, and Writers Guild, I would say $3.5 million up. Excuse me. What a film called Hustle and Flow did is they got a big agency behind the film. This just happened at Sundance. CAA was backing the film on, what was the name of the film? On Nat Turner, a film. Birth of a Nation, right. It sold for $17.5 million. And people say, how did that happen? And the same thing happened when Hustle and Flow was made for 3 to 3.5. It sold for $9 million. So how did they do it? What they did was they got an agency behind them. They got CAA. You get CAA, ICM, and William Morris. And I've said this to producers I don't want to pay them 10%. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Those guys they're all about making money. So if you try to do it yourself and you bring in your small amount of money, you get them behind you, they're gonna go for the biggest dollar value they can. So for $9 million sale, they get $900,000. Or for a $17.5 million sale, they get $1.75 million. So that's maybe a pipeline dream, but it's not impossible if you've got the right material. But again, it's going to boil down to the first thing they look at is who's in it. But if you don't have a major star, you have to have an extraordinary, commercially viable product.
Real quick, I just want to say something before. I definitely want to hear Sarah's input because she has been in the zoo out there with the television world a lot trying to sell things. But I just want to say something first. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but unless you can make a shot from half court 8 out of 10 times, I would forget about the concept of getting your movie into a bunch of movie theaters. I mean, it's just long shot, man. It's pursue the other avenues, the other platforms, and there's so many great ones there. There's so many new models with Netflix and Hulu and all this stuff, and they have a subscription service. If you've got something decent, they will buy it, and you can make it now cheaper. So there's just a whole new way to think about this stuff, and I know it's sexy and it's romantic, and I want to see my movie in a movie theater. But now, I mean, think about the AMC just bought out Carmike. There's basically 2 companies that own all the theaters now, and there's 8 companies to put them in there. So that is still a big gate to go through. So make your content, focus on story. If it's good, it will find a way to make money. Anyway, so I'd love to hear Sarah's take on the whole Hallmark world and all that stuff, you know?
Well, I want to say something about the distribution because I think that what a lot of filmmakers do is distribution is the end of the process. So you don't really think about it until the end. And I think that it's critical to start thinking about distribution at the start. I did go out to AFM for the first time in 2008, and I didn't have a film. I was about to start raising money for Lake Effects, which we shot in Virginia, and I just wanted to meet the players. And I started forming relationships, and there is a window at the end of the market where they're done with all their buying, and they do meet with filmmakers if you can get in the door. And I took advantage of that, met a lot of people, talked to them, and what I found is a lot of them kind of became mentors and telling what we were doing. Like we had this, Lake Effects is on Hallmark now, but it was a story about 2 girls and a mom and all this, and I would pitch it, and the first distributor I talked to said, "Is there a dog in the movie?" And I was like, no, there's not a dog. So we get to like the second meeting, and I'm going on, and like, "Oh, is there a dog?" I'm like, no, there's not a dog. So fast forward a dozen meetings later, I'm in the most important meeting, like with the biggest company that I could talk, that would let me in the door. And I'm talking about the movie, and I'm pitching the mom and the daughters and this feel-good story. "Oh, and by the way, there is a dog." And he's like, "Oh yeah, good. And he makes a note. And so you know what we did? We went back, I called the writer and said, "Okay, we need to write a dog into the script." And put him in the poster, and then you could really sell it. But I think that's just an example of, talking to these people now to find out what is marketable, what will sell the film, what are you looking for is important as you develop your project to know that there is indeed a home for it in the end. And then you already have these relationships so that you're not just going in cold once you have a film, but somebody knows your name and your face because you've been going for several years. It's about the network.
Great. Now we got time for one or two questions on the business side of it. This is on financing, marketing, distribution. Oh my goodness, of course. Let's start over here.
I want to be sure I'm hearing you clearly. If you have a script and a screenplay and you don't have an agent, are you saying that before you even approach anybody to make your movie, you have to have money? You have to have the money first?
We never, I don't think anyone said
No,
that.
nobody said that, no.
So if you have a script, where do you take it?
Oh, that's a good question. I've always recommended, if you have a script that you really believe in, that you try to get an agent in Hollywood if you're trying to go that route. You know, there's the independent route and then there's the commercial route.
But they won't read it if you just send it to them cold, will they? Usually.
Get a
Okay,
lawyer.
I'll give you a trick.
Get a
You want
lawyer.
trick? Here's a trick. I'll give you a little trick. You write an agency as yourself, what you don't tell them is you. You tell them I'm writing on behalf of somebody else, and I'm representing that person, say as a manager, and I want you to consider my client. Because if you go and say, oh, we don't accept unsolicited material, that's what they say. But if you come in with a manager that says, I represent this person, I'd like for you to take a look at it, you might be able to circumvent.
Just hope they don't Google your company.
I just wanted to add one thing. The business sounds really unfair, doesn't it? But from a business standpoint, it costs $18 to $25 million to market a small picture nationwide. 18 to 25 million on a small picture. That is why they say who's in the movie, because the financiers want to know, is this a bankable star? And so people say, well, why won't they get behind my movie? Why can't I get in the theater? Because it costs a lot of money to get in the theater. That's just the way it is, because if you don't advertise the film, nobody's going to go see it.
Okay, another question over here. He got his hand up fast.
So how important are numbers these days? So if I have 3.5 million people from all over the world who view my song with visceral reaction and comments, if I walk in with that, even though it's a song, it's part of the film, how much juice does that carry walking into Nashville or anywhere else with regards to that? Does that count?
Depends how well you sell it. I mean, certainly it's part of your story, you know, and I would use it.
Why would you view a song that's not with a record company on YouTube?
Is it a Bob Dylan song? Oh, it's your song. I thought it was a Bob.
Well, it was a Bob Dylan song that you showed here today.
David, do you want to?
No. Mother references. I remember when Troubadour singing to us about the Masters of War.
David, do you want to tell the story about New World, You Were Kin distribution, and how he wanted to do the crossover, but it was all about our.
Yeah, the short answer is it's very important. And I think you have to make a distinction between theatrical release and everything else. You know, Jesse's right that the cost we keep hearing is $1,000 a screen. A minimum of $1,000 per screen to put your film in theatrical release. That's sending the DCP out, the posters, whatever. That does not count advertising and marketing. That's just to get it there. So you release on 1,000 screens nationwide, a cool $1 million. And that comes right off your profit. And if you dive into it, you see that unless you're Star Wars or what's this new one that's breaking all the records?
Deadpool.
Deadpool, unless you're something like that, then the theatrical release is a loss leader to drive the buzz where you make your money back on digital and DVD. So if you say, okay, you know, I'm not going to make a film that's going to be in theatrical release, so where's my audience? Now, your 3.5 million folks who've watched your YouTube video, there's your audience. And if you know how to get to them, then you know how to market to them. And it's not very expensive to market to those people. What's expensive is to buy primetime television in Tampa and Atlanta and LA. You can't afford that, but you can afford to reach them through social media. Yeah, and we talked to one distributor who was strictly going that way and had a whole deck figured out how to use Facebook and Twitter and all those things. And that was his focus. He's not even talking theatrical with us or anybody else. He is strictly going the DVD, well, really not DVD. It was strictly digital. VOD, yeah.
Another question in the white shirt blouse. Yes.
Yeah, to follow up with that,
Well, you know, we talked to, what do we have, 39? How many appointments did we have at AFM? 39, something like 29, 20? A pile. We talked to a bunch of folks. They kind of blurred together. It's amazing how many folks that was not an issue for, and why it's not is a bit of a mystery to me. So, yeah, I think it's you got to bring your own audience. You know, let's face it. That's the culture that we're in, and the way you can afford to cultivate your audience is through social media. So, yeah,
And by
crucial.
the way, once you get distribution, be aware that you have to do almost all the work still to market your film.
Yeah, they all
Another
want,
question over here.
How does a film make the money back? Like, and you were saying,
Oh.
like,
Lots of ways.
you're limited to having a theatrical release, and so, the avenues of Hulu and all that kind of stuff. How do people translate into actually making money back?
In what context now? How do you make your money back? Well, multiple different revenue streams, hopefully, Like they were saying, the theatrical is a small piece of it, and if you do a deal with like a Netflix or something, they will buy it for a certain amount, for that point of the revenue stream of that product, but you might be able to sell foreign over here and different aspects of it. I mean, Sarah or someone can like address that more.
Yeah.
You have your domestic side and you have your foreign side, and foreign actually in independent films brings in a lot of the revenue. So your broker or sales agent is going to be able to sell the theatrical, so let's take that off the table and say we're not doing that. Well, then if you do a deal with Hallmark is going to give you a certain amount up front, but then you still have a different deal that you're going to do with your DVD distributor and in VOD and whatnot. But then you've got France and you've got Germany and you've got dozens and dozens of countries. In every country, they're selling the DVD rights, which are usually separate from the TV rights, which are separate from the theatrical. So once you add it all up, I mean, there's a lot of players that might be paying smaller amounts. They might be just like 6 figures or 100,000 here or even 50,000, but you end up piecing all that together to get your total amount. You have to keep in mind too, then you're going to continue to get royalties on a television deal. Like our deal with Hallmark, it was for 3 years. 3 years is over. This is the end of the third year, so we're now signing a whole nother. So you have to be prepared to know that the money's not, in many cases, going to come right away the second you make the film. You do a deal at Sundance and $9 million, you're done. I mean, that's the hope, but it doesn't happen. Instead, you can expect that that's going to happen over many, many quarters and many, many years that it might take to actually get your money back.
I'm just saying also, it's kind of the Wild West right now, too. The whole business has been turned upside down. It's kind of where the record business was maybe 5-7 years ago. And there's this huge, with disruption, which is occurring, there's huge opportunity for you to figure out the new way to monetize it. Right. Whether you show your content on your YouTube channel and then you sell ad revenue, or you create ad revenue based on the viewers. So if you have good content that starts getting buzz and gets viral, all of a sudden you've got, 800,000, or you don't have to have 10 million viewers, you have 800,000 regular followers. That has a certain market value to advertisers. And then they're writing you a check for watching your YouTube channel. So there's a huge opportunity right now. The landscape is wide open for people, entrepreneurial, to take content as the tool to create revenue.
And distributors will constantly send you checks. They'll sell to, say, Showtime or HBO, pay-per-view. Then they'll go to, in my case, Comedy Central, BET. We'll go. They just go right down the line from one network to the other. So the money starts out big in the beginning, and then it's a lot less towards the end. But they're constantly selling. That's why they're distributors, and that's how you get your money. You could be making money for 20 years.
We would love to keep making money and talking about it for another 20 minutes, but we need to wrap up because it's time. I want to thank I'm sorry, did you have one more last comment?
No, I just love the story about the dog.
The dog.
and I would like to relate one of my own, which is the American film market was created in 1979, and one of the founders' companies was Canon Films, with Menachem Goram and Yoram Globus. There were two Israelis that were very successful. And the model was this. They will sign not contractual names. For example, a lineup of 5 films. Each film will have a big name attached to it. Back then, Chuck Norris, Charles Bronson, stuff like that. And they would set up a table at the Carlton in Cannes, and they will sell these films to foreign buyers, first the domestic market. And each one will put 20% down. So with 5 films, if everybody pulls 20% down, you have 100% of the film to complete. So they will finish and complete the first film, deliver and collect the 80% of that film with which they finished the second film. The trick of this pyramid is that at the end there were 2 films that were never made. So they will give you credit for those 20% on those 2 films in the next lineup of 5 films at the Cannes Film Festival. So there's always a strategist in the part of the distributors, and there's always room for independent producers.
But where was the dog?
In absolutely every single film.
On the beach. All right, we want to thank our panel. This is a great panel up here. Let's hear it for them.
Thank you guys so much for being here. Before we wrap, I just want to give a very special thank you to the Martin Agency. Brett, thank you so much for running the AV. You're amazing. Gwen, I know she's also one of our sponsors alongside of the Martin Agency. She may have left, but we appreciate you being here. I hope that you're leaving feeling inspired, educated, and you go back and you get down to it and create some brilliant stuff this week. We now have vino, cheese, sodas, water, so enjoy. Thank you, guys.
Probably just